Welcome to our third episode of Haunt Couture with your hosts Chris and
Valerie.
and today we're going to be covering Crimson Peak, another gothic masterpiece by our beloved Guillermo del Toro, because we figured last week, it shares the same costume designer, Kate Hawley, who we also know and love very dearly over here. So sit back and relax as we talk about how tuberculosis influenced the fashion at the time, the Victorian era, and a bunch of other little fun details that we uncovered while researching for this podcast episode.
So let's get started. All right. Well, Chris, like you said, it was released back in 2015 and it was directed by Guillermo del Toro. And it had a pretty star-studded cast, which he loves to do. So, do you want to talk about the premise of the film?
It's about Edith, played by Mia, who you guys have probably seen in Alice in Wonderland, another fantastic adaptation. Lucille, who is Thomas, her love interest sister, played by Jessica Chastain, and her love interest Thomas is played by none other than Tom Hiddleston, aka Loki, Thor's brother. And let's just say there are some very interesting love affairs happening between the trio. And it's basically about Edith finding her way through a very dark world, very dark time, through grief, and also trying to figure out who she is and her ambitions as a young writer. And there's a lot of parallels between her and Mary Shelley that we're going to uncover in a bit as well.
Yeah, so we know that Thomas and Lucille are British aristocracy, and they come over to America and meet with Edith's father, hoping to um, get funding for their mining project. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes, the
And,
clay.
you know, from the very beginning, as soon as Edith's father meets Thomas, he knows something's afoot. He finds him very off-putting to say the least. And so he has somebody investigate, and then um, just kind of all goes downhill from there.
Well, basically, the whole thing is inspired by Couture, and it's basically the inverse of Frankenstein, where Guillermo told Kate in her notes, I want the architecture to be Couture and the outfits to be just built, like constructed. So you're going to see a lot of parallels between those two projects and how Guillermo kind of manifested his way into creating a really beautiful masterpiece that we know and love today. And there's a lot of interesting trends as well, like in clothing that we see on the runway and in stores now. I believe you sent me a Ralph Lauren TikTok, and in their stores, you can find very similar outfits to like Thomas and Edith and Lucille, like last month. It's insane to see the influence still thriving today. So we're going to talk about where that comes from and how color coding also plays a really big role in the characters and their story arcs and the overall plot.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, this is like another project that Guillermo and Kate have worked on, and so let's kind of dive into their backstory because they've been working together for over a decade now. Where did we find this? Where she talked about meeting him in New Zealand while they were prepping to work on The Hobbit,
Yes.
and they bonded over like a collection of books, and sort of how similar their tastes are in literature, and kind of find inspiration in that.
I think she travels with like what 200 books or something. Like that's like what they bonded over. An insane amount, but I respect it because I am the same way. And I'm sure you are too. We're both really big bookworms. But yeah, they have
Yes.
a beautiful love for literature and for horror. And she even said, I think for variety, that like I love leaning into the creepiness of everything. And for this project, she had to really tone in or tone down a lot of the aspects, like the sleeves, a lot of the detailing, because she said it got a little bit overwhelming for the actors, but she has a tendency to lean towards the grotesque and the creepiness, which you're going to see a lot of really interesting details highlighting that interest in Edith specifically.
And also, like, if you've seen the film, you know it's already very creepy, so it's kind of hard to imagine how much they toned down. But
Yeah. And even like they put themselves through it like voluntarily too. Like there's someone on set, I'm not going to say who it is until we get to her character, that she walked in stripper heels, 9-inch stripper heels. And Kate was like, I was in awe. Like, she really was committed to the bit. But anyways, yeah. Let's talk about the color coding and what that means in this movie, because that's gonna be the blueprint for the whole thing basically.
yeah, I believe it was for the same Variety article. where she talked about discussing the costuming with Guillermo, and again, just highlighting the collaborative nature between the two of them. And she said Guillermo already had a strong idea of what the ghosts were and the color coding he wanted for the settings and costumes. For like example, like Buffalo, New York, kind of she described it as like a kind of cornucopia of wealth and overt
Mhm.
lusciousness, and this was reflected with the warm and gold hues versus what we see in Alderdale Hall, where Thomas and Lucille live in England. It's depicted, kind of as, like, starvation, winter, so we see that reflected with, like, the blue hues, and so she read the script, and then basically from there, they just kinda started building the world together.
Yeah, they researched for about a month, and then for 5 months post production, that kind of began, and then 3 months they shot the entire thing. So about a little less than a year. And a lot of references that she used were paintings, lots of mood boards, lots of sketches, which we're going to show you guys if you follow us on TikTok. We have a few sketches. And she says her team basically magpied small theatrical sets, adding lots of fabrics and props from each character for their mood board. I am so jealous of everybody who has ever gone to see this in person. Like, it is a huge, like, mosaic. It's insane. And it's basically proving like this is the inverse of Frankenstein. The architecture makes the movie what it is, but the outfits themselves like add so much more depth and richness to the entire plot. And we see this through Elizabeth and Frankenstein. A lot of parallels between her and Edith, specifically with butterflies.
Yeah, I found that scene in the park with her and Lucille very what's the word? I don't know why off-putting just keeps popping into my head when thinking of this film and these characters. Just yeah, just very kind of disturbing when she was talking about, "Oh, butterflies are very fragile," and then in England, they have moths, which are, more vicious creatures, insects, and they eat
Mhm.
butterflies. I'm like, "Oh, that's not foreshadowing at all."
I mean, I don't blame you. Like, hell yeah, it's off putting to see dead butterflies on the floor. Like, they were
Oh my
dying.
gosh. Yeah, and then she, like, flipped that butterfly over just so the ants could crawl up on it. I'm like, "You are cruel."
And like in that scene, Mia is just like a butterfly, like with the black detailing. It's so even like in her hat, there's like little butterflies, and I'm like, you did
Mhm.
not just do that. Like, okay, whatever. I guess
Tell me how you really feel. Oh my god.
looking like the Grim Reaper, yeah. Like Lucille is always in mourning. That's the thing that I'm like, you are one to talk. Like she has outdated clothing. Her outfits are so like kind of like a tomb. And Kate also describes it as being like a tomb. Like she's just wrapped and mummified in all these like fabrics. Versus Edith, a lot of her outfits, a lot of her skirts are draped, they flow nicely, they're super bright and they're vibrant. But with Lucille, it's the complete opposite. Like she does not want anything to do with anybody, the outside world, or with color. And she blends perfectly in with Allerdale Hall and the decrepit floors and the clay oozing out from the walls.
Yeah, and we definitely get a sense of that when we first meet her at the ball or sort of soiree at the beginning of the film where she's playing the piano, but, like, she's, like, stone cold. She doesn't wanna be there necessarily. Like, she almost comes off as, like, being above all of that. I don't know if you
Mhm.
got that same vibe, but, yeah, she definitely did not find any sort of satisfaction in that environment.
Even like the flowers, who gave it? I think it was Thomas that gave her the white roses. And if you know anything about like floral, whatever, like you already know like that's death. You give someone white roses when they're dying at a funeral, or if your presidents know you like them. But yeah, with her, it makes a lot of sense with the plot twist at the end, like why he would give her white roses. I thought that was so weird watching that in theaters. Like, why would he do that? That's so weird, but makes sense.
So, let's get down into the character breakdown. I think yeah, it was funny because when we were doing our research, I commented to you, like, I found, like, so much on, like, Edith and Lucille, but Thomas is just kinda left in the dust in this film.
Listen, Thomas is just there. He's the weird dog that I don't know, add some ambiance to whatever's going on. But I will say with Thomas, he looks like he walked out of a painting. He just looks so ghostly, even the way that he walks and moves. And you told me earlier, like the shoes like are so used and worn down. Like he doesn't look real.
Yeah, that's just Tom Hiddleston for you. So let's start off with our main character, Miss Edith. And so yeah, just kind of like what you were saying in sort of the differences between her and Lucille. Edith is sort of represents like this light, sort of modern woman for that time. So we see her in sort of like these cream colors in light lace, burnt oranges, basically kind of representing a warm glow. And again, being what's the word? Blending in with her environment as well. So we see a lot of that soft, warm palette. And so she's very classy, very sophisticated, but more gentle than Lucille, as many who have seen the film know. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
One of my favorite tidbits about the movie in regards to Edith's costuming is how like it's all circular. Like it always goes back to when she was like a little girl. I love the opening monologue so much of her in the nightgown waiting for her mom, and she sees her mom, and then you see like the closing shot is the sconce on the wall being encompassed by like the moths, two moths specifically. And it's a really good allegory for what's to come for her and her story, how she's like this beacon of light in this darkness. And Lucille and Thomas are these moths that are trying so hard to like, stay away, but also like they're drawn to this light. And they basically try to mooch off of her and her wealth throughout the movie. And I love how like that little gown also plays a bigger role towards the end when she escapes Crimson Peak. With Edith, I also like to see her as like a symbol of fertility versus Lucille, who, spoiler alert, is dead. She cannot produce children. Um, a lot of women back then and even now, like they envied that. They just wanted to put her down so much because they see her as this beacon of light, this fruitfulness. And we see this in like a lot of her dresses. There's lots of like embroidery with flowers, with fruit, butterflies, symbols of fertility and growth, innocence, if you will, as Kate likes to call it.
I also love I think Kate had described it in an article. I can't remember which one, so if you know, correct me. But she's kind of an exhibitionist, she's not afraid to reveal a little shoulder or like her arms or her back, which we see in that ball gown that she wears with like the little pearl ornamentation on it. And kind of going back to the gold color, I think you found that it was like suffrage inspired. Um, and then we, as the film progresses, like we obviously see like more darker elements are incorporated into her costuming, especially as she's moving to England and sort of again in that darker atmosphere, and almost sort of become like mirrors Lucille in a way.
Yeah, like especially with the silhouettes of their dresses, like the puff sleeves, like they look like foils to each other. I like how we get to see that first glimpse of her morphing into the Sharp family during the ball where she's wearing like the pearls and like the draped silk gown. In the back there's like a single black bow. And then we see the picnic. There's lots of detailing. The hems are black. And then we go, to their wedding. There's lots of like darker colors, and she's matching with Thomas with the navy blue. And then she's in the house. There's lots of like black bows being incorporated into her outfits, and there's lots of darker elements, dark greens, purples, blues. And Lucille is also wearing like dark navy or like teal. I think Kate said for ASU, like the film museum, which if you haven't checked out, you should. They're incredible. They have the exact Victorian shoes that she's wearing in the picnic scene that they referenced off of. It's based off like a real person's shoes. And according to Kate, they hemmed up her skirt and they wanted to show off the boots. And historically, that ties into how tuberculosis affected styling and fashion back then, because for women, they thought, okay, tuberculosis is caused by germs, right? Like every other illness. They thought it was like due to like air, something about like special air or something. It kind of ridiculous, but they thought the longer the skirts, the more dirt. So they would hem up their skirts so it wouldn't drag on the floor. And that's why Edith's skirts, if you look very closely, when she's in Buffalo versus in England, the hemlines are very different.
It's an interesting little detail that she incorporated in, like, her research that she found. Like, what she found in her research regarding tuberculosis in that time.
She wanted to show off the shoes, but I added the tuberculosis part. You're welcome, Kate. Based off my own research. Hire me, please. But that's basically what I
I'll
got from my research about tuberculosis. But yeah, I like to think it applies here too.
I'll be your assistant.
Literally, I'll tie your shoes for you. I'll do whatever.
Uh, that's funny. But also going back to, like, the suffrage inspiration that she took, it was nice to see Edith again. I know we said that she sort of reflects Mary Shelley's life. She's an inspiring author, and I loved her relationship with her dad. Like, he wasn't trying to diminish her dreams or telling her, "Oh, you can't, write a novel, like, you're a woman. What are you doing?"
Literally, and she even says like in the beginning, I would rather die like Mary Shelley, a widow, versus like a spinster or whatever. Just the parallels are insane. And I also love how she like writes her own stuff based off her real life scenario, just like Mary Shelley did. Especially with Frankenstein, it's semi autobiographical because she lost her child around that time, and the creature is a direct representation of her grief and of her deceased child. So at the end of the movie, it's revealed like, oh, this whole thing is kind of like a fable, and the colors are red and green for the hardback cover or whatever, which are the key colors for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. Really nice tie-in to Mary Shelley and her life. Lord Byron is also kind of like, I don't want to say to blame, but he did kind of like reinforce Victorian beauty standards to also like be heavily influenced by tuberculosis. Like he was one of those people that was like, yeah, tuberculosis, pinnacle of fashion, absolutely. So full circle. The whole circle is just involved with both stories.
Guillermo del Toro has a thick brain. If I had made as many films as he had, I feel like I would lose sort of the plot in connecting all my films together.
He
He's a
probably has like a
genius.
huge bulletin board with like the red yarn.
Right, I
He's
was
like,
about to say the red
this is
string just connecting everything together.
literally him.
Like, "Sir, leave some creativity for the rest of us." I feel like he just hogged it all. God has favorites.
And it's him and his insane lore.
And
Speaking
it's him.
of, I want to talk about Lucille and her insane lore with her brother.
Incest. How we love you. No, we don't. Um, yeah, I remember the first time I watched the film and I was like, "Okay, we're going there. We're doing it. We're doing the thing."
I mean, all gothic fables have a little bit of incest. I mean, look at Interview with the Vampire. If you read the book, you already know what I'm talking about. And then Frankenstein, it's not directly stated, but it's implied. That's the beauty of Gothic literature. We're not afraid to talk about or dive into these types of things. But I don't know. I always, whenever I rewatch this movie and Lucille and Thomas kind of like come really close together, I'm like, ooh, no, no.
I'm
And then
like,
their
"Yeah,
outfits are
y'all are
matchy
too
matchy.
comfortable."
Uh.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my god, it's like that question that you asked me at the end of the last episode where I'm like, "I don't know what to say to that."
I have another crazy question for you at
Oh
the end of
god.
this episode.
Okay.
Just wait for it.
Oh, great.
But yeah, I also want to applaud Kate for really capturing the grossness of Lucille and her predatory type of behavior with her clothing, because in contrast to Edith, who is bright, vibrant, full of bows and pearls and delicate fabrics, chiffon, who basically looks like she came out of a Leyendecker movie at one point. I mean, movie painting at one point. With Lucille, a lot of her, I guess, detailing for her outfits look rotted, decrepit, especially with like the teal dress that everybody knows and loves. The back just looks like rotted vines, like basically twirling around the spine. Like it's such a gross detail, but it just encompasses who Lucille is. But I want to know, like, what do you think of Lucille's costuming?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I love that again, just kind of going back to light versus dark. Edith representing light and then her representing just macabre, like, haunting, like, chilling, like, everything that you can think of. I remember, like, again, going back to the first time when I was 15 and, like, I saw this film, and you pointed out earlier how architecture was taken into account when Kate was designing these costumes. I remember it sticking out to me that Lucille blends into the blue dress with the dark walls and, um, again, just being as outdated as the house that they live in, and then also, like, the restrictive, like, hairstyles. Again, kind of going back to Edith representing more of, like, the modern woman versus Lucille and Thomas representing, like, the older, more, conservative type. So, I loved all the detailing with her, and if you guys hadn't guessed it, it was Jessica that wore the 9-inch stripper heels while on set,
It was
and she
indeed
was
her,
running.
and Kate was just like aghast watching her go from point A to point B on set. Like she was dedicated to it. And you would never guess with like the huge trains and just the delicate fabrics that she's wearing. Like you would think the dresses are heavy with the amount of layers, but she made it happen, which I have heard pleasers are comfortable. Mayhaps that was her reason why.
I also kind of thought, like, because she's sort of almost, like, drowning in these big gowns, that it's almost like she's hiding. I don't know if you
Mhm.
got that sense when watching the film?
I got that, and also like it's like she's like hiding, but also she's like bursting out of them. Just like the way the collars are so high up. It reminds me of like the clay in the walls of the house, especially in like the red
Mhm.
gown. Like how no matter how many times they try to like conceal it, the clay always oozes back out. That's basically Lucille. Like she tries so hard to like maintain this perfect type of like facade, but it never sticks and they always see through it. At least Edith's dad did before he kicked the bucket. But yeah, same symbolism applies.
I also love that they decided to go with, like, the red gown for when we first are introduced to her, Um,
Mhm.
because despite sort of representing the conservative, more repressed woman, she was in this vibrant, like, red gown, and she, like, immediately stood out from everyone else in that room. Despite not wanting to, like, be there herself.
But it does kind of feel like she is envious of Edith and how she has her own ambitions going on. And I think that's where they kind of like clash heads a little bit because they are very independent women who don't go by societal standards. At least for Lucille, I think she does lean more conservative with Thomas just because they're like the old money type of people the younger generation wants to be. You know what I mean? Like they are quiet luxury compared to Edith, who just doesn't address her wealth at all and just lives life for whatever she wants. I think she's envious of that, like that freedom.
Yeah, the old money versus new money conversation.
Tale's oldest time. Oh, also, we forgot to mention Ed Gein's in this movie.
Oh, yeah, Charlie Hunnam.
That was a jump scare that I was like, oh, forgot about you. The promo did him dirty. Barely included.
I yeah, I remember I started watching it again after, like, yeah, I wanna say 10 years. Oh my gosh, yeah. Um, and I'm like, "Oh, you're in this, sir."
And he talks normally. That's what creeped me out.
Yeah, in his accent, yeah.
Something else that I wanted to bring up was how Lucille's costuming is also very reminiscent of Elizabeth in Frankenstein. Like the backing of the red gown is the corsetry is kind of like an exoskeleton, and that was done on purpose. The sketches prove that like this was all thought out so intricately. And then you see Mia Goth's character with the malachite dress, the wedding gown, the lacing in the back looks exactly like a spine. But what I love so much is how Kate interpreted both dresses very differently. With Lucille, it's like she's stuck in time and in this gown permanently. But with Mia Goth, it's like she's coming out of this cocoon and she starts off wearing the malachite dress and then into the wedding dress we see her kind of like float around like a moth, you know, basically unraveling at the seams. I just love how both interpretations is just like concluding both of their story arcs in very different ways and set kind of in the same period too.
Right, with, like, Mia, or Elizabeth's character being more warm and kind, and then Lucille, who is just cold and very detached.
Yeah, basically. It's so interesting to see how both designs can be, I don't want to say assigned, but like both be put in very different situations to mean something very different. It's really cool.
Right, representing like one side of the coin or being half or two sides of a coin. I don't know what that saying is.
Two sides of a different coin. I mean, different sides, same
Two sides.
coin.
Right, yeah, something like that, yeah. You guys know what we mean. Should we briefly touch on Thomas? Or we still have more to say about Lucille?
All dresses, all costumes for this movie were handmade. Multiples included for stunt work and for rainy days and everything. But specifically for the blue dress for Lucille, I wanted to point out how Kate said that they suggested a hint of her bones coming through when they did the lacing in the back for this dress and for the paint job. And they made it tight, like super duper tight to make it look like she was malnourished, essentially. And that's kind of like where the idea of Jessica Chastain wearing the super big heels came from. They wanted to use her height as much as possible with that dress. Like they wanted it to look like she was just this skeleton looming over like everybody.
She's just incredible, just really talented. And I think we wanted to talk about a viral clip at some point in this episode.
You want
Um,
to talk about it now or later?
I mean I mean, really at any point, because it just applies to everything that we're talking about in this episode and then pretty much like our whole podcast. But let's get to the Thomas of it all, and then we'll we'll get back. We'll get back to that.
All right. So Thomas, our beloved Thomas, is uh more than a butler. He is more than a rich guy in a nice suit. And as Edith puts at one point, you know, his suits are very outdated, but he's very stylish. And then she also kind of like juxtaposes that statement with when her dad passes away. She's like, oh, he's stylish because he doesn't want to look old. But then you have Thomas in the same room who is both old and outdated. And he's kind of like, damn, okay, I didn't know you felt that way. Cool. When she was identifying her dad's body. But that's for a specific reason. If you've watched the movie, like why he dresses so stuck in the romantic period versus the Victorian period.
I think you pointed out that he was almost like his costume design was sort of be shadow like, and again, like kind of what you were saying at the beginning, he looks like a ghost that came out of a painting and almost like Phantom of the Opera-esque.
Literally, that's the first thing I thought of when I watched the movie. I was like, oh, so this is like the Phantom. And Edith is Christine because of the way he's just like lurking around every corner. He's wearing only black and white, no colors whatsoever. Him and his sister are like in a perpetual state of mourning. And then when you put Edith next to them at her dad's funeral, she fits right in and it's so creepy. But there's still a hint of light, you know, to her with her golden hair. But with them, they just look like statues. Like there's no humanity within them.
I think it was interesting that Kate pointed out how he just sort of appears. And going back to her being an author and how she's writing this novel, and the editor points out, where's the love story? Like, you need that. And so here we have Thomas that just shows up, kind of just like he walked out of like her novel.
He's like the Fabio of their world. Yeah. And then when she
Oh, yeah.
steps foot into their house, she's like, oh, y'all live like this? Like, he looks like that? Like, on an everyday basis? That's crazy. And all of his costuming was done by hand, like I mentioned before. And they worked with a company in England who specializes in period pieces and costuming to make sure all of it was accurate and fitted well for Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah. So we're attaching the words conservative, progressive, poor, ominous to Thomas. Love that.
Hey, he's stylish though. I will give him that. Like he really does stick out. Like in the family dinner where the dad's like, "Hey, like get off my daughter, like leave." Like he
Oh,
and
my
Lucille
daughter.
like him and Lucille like stand out so bad and I feel so bad for them. Like he's wearing a cravat, everybody else is wearing a bow tie. And I'm like, okay, he really does look old. And his sister just looks like an old lady, like hunched over her plate. And even the dad looks younger. And I'm like, oh, I kind of see why Edith said that he like dresses like younger than his actual age, because it really does make him look kind of funky in this really like modern quote unquote setting. Like it just looks so uncanny.
Get Off My Daughter was wild.
It's true though.
I
He
love
said,
that.
"Hey, get out." He's like, "Dude, get out. Like I know who you are. Beat it."
I think it's crazy that, like, that's the guy that Edith fell for, you know?
I
Like,
know.
you have Charlie's character who's just, you know, again, very supportive of her and also finds, like, what she finds interesting himself, and then you have Thomas who I mean, yeah, he's, like, still supportive and loves her novel, but it's kinda that, like, that thing that she was fighting at the beginning. So, yeah, we're falling for him. We love the bad boys.
Literally, and even at the very end, like I would even like argue him looking like a ghost looks more authentic than him looking like a person. Him and his sister, like when they're all white, it looks more natural than like them looking like people. And for once, he's on the same page as Edith. Like they both wear the exact same colors. It's really scary to see. And they're just drenched in this clay and the blood that basically ruined their lives and ruined the quote unquote generational wealth that they were trying to hoard that is non existent. And they're set free.
This is why we don't hoard money, people.
Period.
I loved that, like, I know this is kind of off topic, but, like, what her father said when he was meeting with Thomas at the beginning, listening to, like, his pitch for funding, his commentary on America, where he's like, "Over here, we're used to, like, working hard and not using our privilege." And I'm like, "Oh, not in these days."
I'm like, what are you doing here then? Capitalism runs the world. And then him with his little gadget, he's like, we have no time for you and your toys. And I'm like, oh,
He read him to filth. Oh my god, and that was, like, what? I don't know how long that meeting was, but it was
2 seconds.
he humbled him. He humbled him real quick. But you also did some, like, more research, about the tuberculosis and how that inspired Thomas's costuming as well.
Yeah. Oh my god, you guys are gonna think like, oh, she loves tuberculosis, she's obsessed with it. But like I
Loves
I
it.
thought it was I just think it's so interesting because like it the influence is still there. It's like to this day. Like for TB back then, it inspired like the basis of Victorian fashion. If you ever wondered why all the paintings from back then, like all the women are like so thin and transparent and their mouths are like red and their hair is so long and flowy and like whimsy, it's because that was the standard, and that's what they looked like when they were dying from TB. And then when they would basically be deceased from consumption, as Aunt Gladys likes to point out in Weapons, if you caught that, just laughing at that one part where she said, oh, she has a touch of consumption. I'm like, girl, consumption?
A
That's like
touch.
when you die.
That's not a touch, that's it.
You done. Like, AO. But yeah, that's basically what they would look like when they would die. And so that's the basis of their trends back then. And for men, it was kind of on the same par. But I told Valerie earlier, like the reason why Thomas is so clean shaven and like groomed isn't because like, you know, he's poor and he has like extra time to shave. It's because back then with TB, they thought like beards and like sideburns, mustaches were like dirty, which goes against like the trends they had like in the 1850s from the Crimean War, where lots of men in Britain and then the US later on would grow out their facial hair because it was trendy and stylish and kept them warm during the winter. They decided to just shave it off because they figured, okay, like if the women are getting sick from long skirts, that means we're gonna get sick from the hair on our face because it's gathering all these germs in the air. So that's why Thomas is just marble. Like he looks so baby skin smooth in some frames and scenes because that's what was on trend back then for their health. And for women, it was just them looking as like waff as possible, like ghostly. And that was the inspiration behind the picture you probably seen on Pinterest of Edith running around the hallway in her nightgown. That came from Victorian painting by Millay, I believe, John Everett Millay. But that's where all that stuff comes from. And to this day, it's kind of like a cliche if a character starts coughing in the first act. We like instinctively know, okay, they're gonna die by like the third act. Like a Bohemian Rhapsody or like Moulin Rouge, like even like in Crimson Peak, where Edith starts coughing, we're like thinking immediately, subconsciously, most of us are thinking like, oh my god, she has TB, like she's gonna die. That's where that comes from, basically.
I love that little detail that you just said about, oh, once a character starts coughing, that's it.
Yeah, like that's where it comes from this, that people think, oh, they have like consumption, and it still applies to this day. Whenever someone starts coughing, you're like, oh, they're gonna die in whatever play or movie we're watching.
Can I just say I appreciate Kate acknowledging that while, they were trying to get as accurate as possible to the time, she didn't say it was like what was then. You know what I mean? Like for Elle, she said the silhouette was true to the period, but we took allowances because the colors and details were more based on themes and the character arc. So I'm sure while she took into account some of this historical context, she wasn't again going for complete accuracy. Whereas like some costume designers say, "Oh, I looked at this time frame and so," and then you have people who just dissect everything and they're like, "This actually wasn't accurate for that time." And I think you had talked about it earlier before we started recording for the next episode, which we'll talk about at the end. But again, some of those pieces weren't accurate for that time, for that film that we'll be talking about soon.
Super ominous soon. A threat.
Soon.
But yeah, that's Kate. Like, as someone else mentioned in my TikTok comments, if you've ever studied like fashion or costuming, like you have to know the rules in order to break them appropriately. And with Kate, she knows the rules like front, back, sideways. Like she knows like the most important thing to basically stay accurate to is the silhouette of that period. And then you can draw inspiration from a broader range to basically carry out this narrative for the character. And for this project, it was like you could kind of see that with Lucille and for Thomas, because TB wasn't as like, I guess I don't want to be mean, but it wasn't like taken as seriously until like the late like 18th century. But with Thomas, you can see like he's clean shaven. And this movie literally like starts 1887 ends 1891. So there would be no reason for him to be super paranoid around that time. But there's a reason why. Like they wanted him to look that way. You know what I mean? Like she basically uses all these little details as plot devices, as character traits. And it's really, really like wholesome to see somebody pay attention to that so deeply for all the history nerds out there. Like it's so, I guess, like relieving to see, because a lot of movies nowadays, I'm not going to say which one, that are up for discussion that people are over their heads about for historical accuracy. You can kind of feel like, oh, they just threw this on last minute. You know what I mean? Everything here serves a purpose.
I just found it so interesting that that's how the film started, like her mom warning her, "Beware of Crimson Peak."
Did you see the mom's skull?
I
Were you able to
did,
see
yeah.
it? You know what it reminds me of?
Oh god, what?
Adam, the scar on her forehead.
Oh.
Little scars. I was like, oh my god, I know where the idea came from now. But I love with the mom's design, like on the bottom of her skirt, the dead moths. It's on display at the Academy Museum. Like little fake dead moths at the bottom. And then we cut back to like the camera showing the sconce on the wall and the two moths. And I'm like, oh, so was her relationship with her mom equally as bad? And that's why Edith excused a lot of their behavior, because
Hmm.
maybe there's some similarities between the two and the moth symbolism. It would make a lot of sense because the mom is dark, just like Lucille and Thomas, and she's also in perpetual mourning. But I I don't know. I found the parallels quite interesting. And the mom's creature design in the movie.
I think it's also interesting again how much emphasis like Guillermo puts on like the mother figure in his films. Generational trauma.
My guy does it best. Even with Edith and Elizabeth, you can tell there's some motherly issues going on. aside from Victor, like those are the two figures that we can definitely see the trauma cycles kind of like repeating themselves over and over again, and they're trying to break out as much as possible by their eccentricity and by their hobbies. Yeah. Also, like how in both movies, the mom is also like a Madonna, like this biblical
Right?
figure that looks like you'd see like in like a church somewhere.
Adding more to that haunting aspect of his films.
Victorians loved mourning. That was the culture back then. They just loved romanticizing the struggle. And that's basically why we still romanticize struggle today. Like it's just a cycle that we haven't escaped as society or across multiple cultures either. Like it's just ingrained in us at this point.
Kind of like a survival tactic.
Basically.
Laughing through the pain.
Oh, also with Edith, a lot of the detailing with her dresses, very antique looking, very fashionable back then and now. Rosettes are becoming more popular again, and antique velvet also made a large appearance for her wedding outfit specifically. And with Lucille, we kind of see velvet, but not really in the same fashion. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see. We gotta talk about those sleeves. The Edwardian sleeves are incredible. And for each sleeve, there was about 3.5 meters worth of fabric used for each arm. So imagine how heavy they were.
I think, yeah, through all aspects of this filmmaking, the actors are just incredible. Haunting.
Also, like imagine you're carrying all this weight in all these
Yeah.
fabrics and you have TB. That's the crazy part that I'm like, oh, so you're like dying, 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 struggling to like get up out of
You
bed.
are
Like,
literally anchored to death.
and they were like, romantic. Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. And more of that, please.
Some other ways you can see this affect us nowadays through tanning, surprisingly.
Tanning?
Because yeah, this is where tanning came from because hemlines rose over time because they're like, oh, dresses equal dirty, whatever.
Mhm.
So by the beginning of the 1900s, shoes became more prominent in styling. And so the higher the hemlines rose. And then around the same time, doctors around the world started researching sunbathing as a treatment for TB. So that's why tanning became a worldwide phenomenon because of TB.
My brain immediately went to, like, tanning beds, not, like, natural tanning. I was like, "What do you mean tanning?"
No, literally, I like researched that and I was like immediately like Final Destination, the tanning bed scene.
Oh, no. Oh my god. That traumatized me. I said never. I will never do that. Not that I need it, but never, ever will I do that. I think now we can kinda talk about that controversial clip.
Do you want me to paraphrase it?
I mean, yeah, you're the one that brought it to my attention, so
Okay.
take it away.
Basically, for all my film nerds out there, all cinephiles, film bros, what have you, this past weekend, Luca Guadagnino, the director for Challengers, Call Me by Your Name, lots of other famous projects that have gotten lots of traction within the last few years, basically said that costume design is not as legitimate as regular designer work. And what I mean by that is he said, okay, with costume design, they're focused more on the body of the performers or the actors versus with fashion design, they're more concerned with the construction of the garment. And let's just say, with that viral clip, a lot of our favorite designers jumped him in the comments, including none other than Kate and Ruth E. Carter, who was designer for Sinners. They basically said, hey, dude, this is not okay. That you cannot say this about an artistry. And then all the Twitter girlies were also like saying, hey, dude, we can't defend you. We can't defend you on this unk. Like, you got yourself into this mess. You can't support this. And I sent it to Valerie because I was like, oh man, like this is gonna be talked about on a lot of podcasts and on a lot of pages, and we have to discuss it.
And like I told you, I'm like, "My guy, you're a director. You know that everything from the sound design to set design to costuming, like, everything has to be cohesive in order for a project to really resonate and gain positive traction from an audience. So it just doesn't make any sense for you to say this as a director. Like, I think there's a conversation going around right now where a lot of people throw around this idea that in this day and age, we aren't media literate. Like, we can't, like, an audience member, if you go see a film or a TV show, like, you miss things, right? And it's like,
Right.
I don't think that's necessarily correct. So it's like, what makes you think that somebody won't automatically pick on whether or not you spent time on a costume, like as a director, working with your costume design team to make these characters stand out even more? And like costume designers, they have to pay attention to everything about the actor and the character. So it's like, how does this actor represent this character on page? How can this costume help the actor bring that person to life? So I he's wild for that.
Man, I'm going to say this as nicely as possible because he scares me. But as someone who has seen the majority of his filmography, I think that statement is wild, especially with Queer that just came out like what last year. Jonathan
Yeah.
Anderson from Dior was the costume designer for that movie, by the way. And I would like to argue, as someone who semi enjoyed the movie, okay, I'm not going to give it too much praise. The costumes made the movie, and I'm not afraid to say that. Like the tailoring of the suits really did emphasize Daniel Craig and Drew Starkey's performances. And I guarantee you, if they did not fit them right, if they did not reflect the characters and their occupations, quote unquote, the movie would not be the same. It would not be the same movie. So for him to say that with Jonathan Anderson as the actual costumer for that movie was insane. Because I'm like, you do not realize designers and costumers are on the same level of skill set. The only difference between the two of them is their inspiration. Like for couture or for, I guess, just regular designer work, it's the clients that they're focusing on versus with costumers, the clients are the actors, they're the performers. And like you said, they have lots of other things to consider when designing these pieces. And I'd also argue that that's a lot harder because they have to make multiples of the exact same garment over time. And I think it's just insane to just throw that to the side and just dismiss that effort that is so important for film and for theater.
Exactly. And the thing with his films is that I always thought like the costume designing again just makes it seem more realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, like he's touching on these very real life topics. And I'm like, okay, like everything is flowing the flow state. If you know, you know. Oh my god. But anyway, like
Six,
everything to
seven.
me I'm not even gonna get into that. But you would think that everything again, like as a director, everything is intentional, even the costume design. So just these comments, this commentary that he gave, I'm just like, yeah. Yeah. Nice little segue. What else do we have to talk about today for this film?
Oh, I wanted to talk about my favorite detail from Crimson Peak that we have not mentioned before or during the recording of this episode, and that is the belt Edith wears on the picnic or during the picnic.
Ooh,
It is 100% human hair and it's braided by Kate's team. She said that they made sure it was authentic human hair because that's very Victorian, quote unquote. And the hands are made to look like her mother's hands hugging her waist, and that was made or sculpted by wax. And it was basically glazed to look like ivory. And I just love that little detail so much. I have yet to see any other film top that besides the next one we're going to be talking about. But she basically said the reason why they made that piece was because it represents mourning jewelry and all the different types of mourning jewelry that were very popular around that time.
as you said that, the fact that it's human hair, it just brought back the quote from that ASU article. where she talks about, how she enjoys freaking people out. I'm like, "Yep, that's very, very Kate. Very Kate of her." And honestly, just the fact that Guillermo gave her, like, the space to be able to do that, I love that.
Speaking of, that was the question I'm gonna ask you. Would
Oh, are we at
you,
the end?
because we're talking about it, so I'm like, might as well ask you, like, would you ever make morning jewelry or like hair jewelry for your partner?
Ooh, yeah. Why not? I honestly thought this was gonna be, like, that other question. I was like, "Oh my god, I plead the 5th."
No, I laid on you easy this time because I was like,
Good.
oh, I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, I should ask her that question because I would. I don't know if I would make it into a locket or a belt per se because I want it to last longer. Either a rosary or like a wallet chain situation would be a little bit more ideal for me so they could carry me
Mm,
around wherever they go. I have too much
I
hair
love that.
anyways, and I shed too much anyway, so like have at it. What about you? If you had to choose the style, I guess, what would you go with?
Well, my initial thought was a locket, but now that you bring it up about, like, this sort of token lasting longer, I have to kind of think about it a little more. But yeah, I would say locket for now.
We need to bring that back, honestly.
I was gonna say, I'm like, is this gonna be a segment where, like, at the end of every episode, it's gonna be like, "What question will freak out Valerie the most?"
Honestly, that just means we're close because I ask my friends and my family the weirdest questions whenever we're watching something. They already know to expect the unexpected with me. So you're
I'm
getting there.
glad I give you that safe space.
Speaking of romantic, Count Orlok, our our fave hunk of the Victorian era. Yes, Count Orlok, played by beloved Bill Skarsgård, is going to be our central focus next week as we talk about Nosferatu. And that's why I also wanted to ask you about the hair morning jewelry question because that also plays a really big role in that movie too. There's lots of parallels between Nosferatu and Crimson Peak. So, in honor of the Christmas spirit, we're going to be talking about that and lots of your faves, outfits, ensembles, and how we can see that nowadays with all the different trends going on for Victorian dressing and styling.
So be sure to tune in.
And as always, stay safe and stay warm out there, and we'll catch you next time.
See ya.